Both of my parents are immigrants from Mexico. Due to the particular circumstances that their families faced, both of my parents were forced to move to the US at a young age. I, on the other hand, was born in Southern California. I was raised in a city called Southgate, which, according to the US Census, and I quote, Southgate is 98.4% Hispanic or Latino. Because of the predominance of Latino people in Southgate, I had the privilege to be able to relate to my peers and teachers through a shared experience of being out of place or stuck between two cultures. I never really experienced discrimination because most of my community was Latino, and so it was a bit removed from structural white supremacy. It wouldn't occur to me until I would arrive to college how I would realize how under-resourced Southgate is. Even scarier that I would realize in college how a community not so far from where I grew up could be completely different and offer completely different things based on the population and based on who lives there and what kind of access they receive. I never experienced discrimination for being Latina or identifying as Latina. My authenticity as a Mexicana or as a Mexican American woman was always called to question by my family and peers. I was definitely privileged in many ways as far as my parents' educational background. My mom pursued a higher education while she was raising us, so I was able to have access to vocabulary and help with my own educational aspirations that I'm sure a lot of my peers and a lot of people in my community did not easily have access to. While I was growing up, I wasn't conscious that this was a privilege until one of my peers would point it out. I remember being in class and saying this phrase in Spanish, and one of my friends said something that has haunted me since that day. He said, "What? White girl could speak Spanish?" I remember feeling so confused and so irritated by that comment because I didn't understand it in the moment. But I knew that to be called a white girl or whitewashed meant that I was different and that I wasn't an authentic Mexican girl or even Latina, and that whiteness wasn't a positive thing, wasn't viewed positively because it was almost viewed as you were like a uppity person or something. I think the fact that I wasn't so fluent or open about speaking Spanish also has contributed to how I was perceived as an inauthentic Mexican girl. I think this moment was really pivotal as far as how I identify because I think it speaks to how uncomfortable I felt claiming that Mexican identity because I think another moment in my life where it was a defining factor in my racial identity was when I decided to move to Berkeley. It would be the first time I would leave my community and immerse myself into a more, I guess, culturally diverse or racially diverse community, which is scary coming from a community like Southgate where I was in my comfort zone and I was around people who look like me or talk like me or share the same food interests or share the same, I guess, shared similar culture and similar experiences. So I remember being so nervous coming to Berkeley. Prior to coming to Berkeley, I had little interaction with people outside of other races. And whenever I did, they were always people of color or third world people. And so I was curious to see if that would change once I came to Berkeley, or if I would question my identity or maybe return to like my Mexican American identity, or how my identity would change or remain the same. And for the most part, it's remained the same. I just feel comfortable keeping that Latina identity. I remember for the first few weeks, I was uncomfortable telling people how I identified because I felt like there would be connotations attached to it, and I didn't want to be placed in a box where people were constantly judging me or thinking about me in stereotypical ways. But then I realized that in doing that, like, it was inevitable. People were going to do that. And so why not use that agency to define myself and to use it as a place of education or conversation rather than putting myself in a particular box that I don't feel reflects who I am completely. In addition to that, being immersed in this multicultural community and campus life and living in a multicultural co-op, I think I've become more conscious of my racial identity and how it is different. My experiences were different than that of my peers. I'm more conscious about the racial injustices that are present, not just in Berkeley or California, but all of the United States that I wasn't conscious of when I was younger because I didn't have a developed sense of what racial injustice was because I never saw it firsthand. I think it's only natural that I gravitate towards people who share a common history or share a common experience as far as feeling awkward or a little out of place, not just on campus, but in the US as far as identity goes. And so I do gravitate towards Latinos or Latinas, and I do gravitate towards people of color as far as who I feel comfortable having relationships with and pursuing friendships with and connections with. That's my comfort zone, and